money is influence in our political system. Money is influence. Money dictates who you see, how often you see them, and what your impression is. And so why I'm so thrilled to talk to you, Ali and Claire, and I'll sit down, is because you're really changing that game. Sway is meant to give people a real shot at influencing based on their merits. So before we get started, Claire, do you want to explain what Sway is?
Okay, so Sway. Sway is a digital platform, and its use is for people like you and me and everyone watching to gain political influence by joining forces around shared cause. So today, we are building advocacy tools for local causes, which enables leaders to join coalitions or form coalitions that will organically coalesce into networks. Over time, these networks will do two really important things. One, they're going to displace traditional political parties with internet native micro coalitions. And then they're also going to disrupt the billions of dollars that is spent on politics. Long term, we see ourselves as a governance graph. So infrastructure that is modular, granular, responsive to what people really care about. And I think this is kind of scary to say, but I'm leaning into it more. If Sway is successful, I think we can restructure the fabric of democracy.
So I'll
break it down small potatoes.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's truly it is a frighteningly large vision that is much bigger than any of us. But it's a valid question. What would representative democracy look like if it was invented today in the digital era when we all have a computer in our pocket and we're all connected? Yet the way we select our government is basically the same as it was hundreds of years ago. But you might be wondering, well, how would you change things? For anything to succeed, it has to work at a small level, at the atomic level. So the core of what Sway is building, the core, transaction is a very simple concept: vote with me, and vote with a person on a topic. And I'll come back to that in a second, but just to explain why we're talking about something small and simple is you can't have systemic change overnight. You need something that makes sense for the first 10 users, that gives them some benefit, or the first 100 users, and that's how you grow to 100,000 or someday 100 million. To explain how it works, maybe I'll do a quick show of hands. Everyone has some issue they're passionate about. It might be a local issue, like you want more bike lanes in your town or fewer bike lanes in your town, or you want the school to eliminate smartphones in elementary school, or you want more advanced classes. So raise your hand if there is a cause of some sort that you care about in your town, in your area. Pretty high show of hands. At the same time, most people don't know how to connect the dots when they are voting. So at the moment that they're going in and saying, oh, look, my California ballot is 6 pages long, and who am I going to choose for state assembly member? I didn't even know we had that. What do they do, and how does it relate to the things I'm passionate about? Most people do not have a clue, and so they find weird, different ways to make that decision. Some leave it blank, some might ask a friend, some might just vote based on their party. And this concept of a political party, it's a shortcut. It's basically, I kind of like Democrats more than the Republicans, or the other way around, and so I'm just going to use that for lack of any other information of what to vote for down the whole ballot. What we're introducing is a better shortcut that fits the fact that we are all interconnected on the internet, and a new kind of intermediary to connect the issues you care about to those questions on the ballot. So suppose that you have a friend who's, to use the example I use, actually I'll use the real example. Claire lives in the dog patch in San Francisco, and her micro local passion is there's a unsafe crosswalk near her. It's a real danger. It's right off the highway, and someone is going to die because cars are whipping through here. So she wants the city to do something to make this crosswalk safer. And what can someone with, a concern like that do today? They can go to the city council and try to talk to someone, but people, elected officials don't really listen to one voter saying this crosswalk is unsafe. So Claire has posted a page on Sway that says vote with Claire on, I forget the
Street safety.
hashtag street safety. So this concept of you can have a topic that you're asking people to vote on, and she's put QR codes on each end of this crosswalk, and people might see that QR code, go to Claire's page and click the button, vote with Claire on street safety. And this feels a bit like signing a petition, but it'll do two things. First, the person clicking, the follower, it'll check their ID and validate that they are a human being, registered voter in San Francisco. Boom. Suddenly, Claire has a voter who agrees with her on this topic. And then the other thing is that person is now going to be connected to receive election alerts from Claire to remind them to vote in the next election with a little mini voter guide for this is the city councilor to vote for, which Claire can kind of direct that person. And now that person who probably couldn't name a single city councilor now has or city supervisor, I think.
Yeah, it's the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, most people don't even know the difference. But now they don't need to worry about that because Claire will tell them, here's who to vote for because you care about this crosswalk as I do. And this transaction benefits both sides. The voter gets a tiny bit of information for who to vote for to make them more informed when they vote. But perhaps more importantly, Claire now can say, I have 50. Is it 50 yet?
We've hit 60 on the QR code.
60 San Francisco registered voters who will vote with me. And that's enough to go to the city supervisors and tell them, hey, who wants 60 votes in the next election? Support my street safety ask, and I'll recommend they vote for you.
Okay.
All right.
That was great. And I'm just going to play my Oprah a little bit where we're going 90-second speed round answers here. Because I think, first of all, Sway is a startup, Lanai is a startup. Feedback is gold. Good feedback, bad feedback. There's a lot of community activists and organizers in the room who have, I think, a lot of thoughts on what would make the spirit of this really valuable for them. So we're going to open it up to questions later. But just to give it an idea to like crisp it quickly, what popped in my mind is there are several people here who I always go to say, who should I vote for on this local issue?
Same.
Who should I vote for? Like, we all have that. This systematizes that. Yeah. So if I go with Michelle for education and somebody else for judicial, et cetera, this basically puts high octane on that. Now, Claire, you both came to this for different reasons. One of your insights came from actually doing the field organizing for Kamala. I don't know that everybody understands what that entails, but maybe brief description of what that entailed and why it lent itself to this insight.
Yeah. Well, let me first say that Sway is neutral infrastructure. So despite the fact that I worked for Kamala Harris, this is going to be open to everyone. And what we are finding thus far is that Democrats and Republicans, and particularly people who have neither party, are really compelled by it, and that a lot of the issues on the wait list are things that we wouldn't like Democrat or Republican going to fix my crosswalk. I don't really care. Okay, so field organizing. So the role of field organizers are to recruit volunteers and then get them out either onto the phones or at doors canvassing. So I come from a classroom teaching background. I trained all of these people to go out and knock doors. And people were concerned that they didn't know policies well enough, which is fair because there were 7 people they were theoretically knocking the door for. And so I found myself, particularly for down ballot candidates, where there wasn't as much news and they didn't have as much awareness. And also just I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I would say 60% of our volunteers were coming from out of state, particularly at the end. So
say what down ballot means.
Down ballot. So in this case, it was state rep and state senator, and the maps, my field office supported 6 different state reps and 3 different state senators, and people would be trading maps of where the houses they were going to go to canvass. And I'm sure they took the wrong literature. And I found myself frequently being like, oh, you're going to Shaler? That's the veteran who cares about healthcare, right? So super reductionist thinking. And then you get to the door and everyone either has something that they care deeply about, that they like really want to go in passionately, and it's hard to match them, or they were kind of pissed that we were there. I think dislike is a form of care. So I would say that everyone had something. And then people would come back and they'd debrief with me, and that all stayed with me. It really didn't have a systematized way to get to any candidates, let alone to the top of the ballot. And the disconnect between the top of the ballot, I think you all would be like more aware of that. So we were taking out literature about choice. When you go to the doors in Pittsburgh, the number one thing was something called Nippon Steel, which was a company that was looking to acquire USX. We had no literature on that. So long story short, traditional campaigns, I think, are underutilizing technology. The literal door knock might be enough of a hint there. State-of-the-art is text messages, and I type stop on the Democratic ones, so not good. But I think, overall, it's very hard for us to determine what the collective will of people is. That's a very hard problem to solve, and Sway has the opportunity to be able to look at what people care about and send that back up the chain as opposed to a top-down message.
Yeah. And Allie, similarly, maybe share with folks your prior experience as co-founder of Code.org and NEO. And I think you had insight both from how you grew up as well as just your deep instincts about technology and team on why this simple concept of why does influence happen through these old world ways when everything else around us has been transformed for more connected, more social influence. So little background on you and how you came to this insight.
Yeah. So, my quick bio, many of you might have heard of the Hour of Code or Code.org. My twin brother and I started that after we had sold, each of us we had sold our second startup, essentially. I've been a successful entrepreneur and investor in a number of successful companies. And Code.org, besides building a platform that now 100 million children are learning to code on, did a lot of advocacy. So we were asking, state level governments to make computer science count for graduation requirements. We're talking to different school districts to have them adopt computer science, and just generally found how difficult it is to get a local government to do something, even when there is no opposition. No one is against it. Any parent you ask, any child you ask, any teacher to ask, 100% for it. Yet things don't really happen very easily, and it's much harder when there is opposition, when you have a complex issue that there are two sides and so on. One thing I generally found, and I'll say this in a blunt way, and there are exceptions, but most elected officials have only one thing they care about that drives their decisions, which is, will this help me win the next election? Mm-hmm. And there are exceptions. There are some who are doing decisions based on what's right or what's right for their constituents. Even they, though, if there's something that is going to cost them the next election, are going to think twice about it because they want to preserve their own job and to be able to make change. And so as a result, you have special interests of various sorts that have undue influence because they've organized ways to drive votes, whether it's in the form of using money, as you mentioned, which pay for ads or pay for door knocking, that could shift the election outcome, or organizing a group around a single issue, the equivalent of the NRA sending a voter guide to all their members. Organized groups like this carry a threat because they can say, hey, do what we want, or else we'll tell all of our members to vote for your opponent. And so as a result, a small group, a minority, can wield undue influence and kind of much more influence than the general public. What we're building with Sway is a way to give the general public the same ability to organize so that it's all on a level playing field, and to kind of bring back elected officials to serve all of us, not just serve certain interests.
I cannot, at some point I'll write a tell-all book, but I'm not going to do it right now. But this whole sort of mafiosa part of political campaigning, where people say, I will support you if, you've seen it on West Wing and whatever. It is very weird. It actually happens. It happened to me. And I was like, wait, are you actually saying you're going to support me if I do this? Is that what's happening here? I don't need your support. Fuck off. Of course I did. I mean, if I really was only in it for winning. But this sort of idea of almost the people you want least sometimes having influence because they have time on their hands to influence, don't have day jobs, don't have a lot of vested interest other than their job is to influence. Like, think about that. If my job is to influence, i.e. be a lobbyist or be a particular paid gun to organize for this thing, if I'm not a small business owner, if I'm not the school board president, if I'm not someone who has stakes in the outcome, it's just such a weird, perverse incentive. Okay, so switching to section 2 here, the technology itself. So we have had 20 plus years of internet development. I can say firsthand, there are some of us who feel blood on our hands for some of the technology we've created, intended to do one very good thing, ends up doing something really terrible. In Lanai, we are very conscious of this. We have that painting that says 2020 because it's about thinking, we're developing Lanai to empower humans to do extraordinary things with AI, and we don't think that will happen if there isn't a mechanism to help guide leaders to make smarter decisions about when to deploy AI and when to deploy something uniquely human to a human. But we have to guard against the inevitable push that's going to be used for surveillance, or it's going to be used simply to justify the cost of cutting a bunch of jobs. And we have thoughts on that. You guys know social networks have been completely manipulated by actors with very bad, opposite to what Sway's intended outcome is. So tell me specifically, if it works well, I'm with Amanda on schools and I'm with Gaurav on judges, perfectly influenced, perfectly outcomed. Very likely it won't happen that way. So what do you imagine, and how are you preventing against all the ways that could be weaponized?
Okay, so we are designing with neutrality, trust, and openness in mind. There are a couple ways that I think some of the things that have plagued other social networks will not show up on Sway. I mean, particularly, we are not going to algorithmically feed you like this, so now you probably like this as well. That's off the table. But on Sway, you will go through rigorous ID verification. Yes. So you will be a human and not a bot. And that is critically important because I think right now the proxy for this thing is really awesome and people like it is X likes. And, that's very easy to discredit because I'm sure we all project that some large proportion of those are not real people. So your real identity matters. And then, so if you are a supporter on Sway, so if you want to support the crosswalk, you can tell me that you're doing it and then never actually go on because I will never know who you are because support on Sway is default anonymous. There are ways that supporters can amplify causes, but that basically turns you into a leader. The reason that we chose this paradigm is because it mimics the ballot box. So your vote is, first of all, definitely your own. So even if you choose to vote with me, if you disagree, you go into the ballot box, I'll never know. This is a core tenet. We are really all about building up human agency, and that has to be true. The other thing is on the flip side, if you're a leader, you need to say that with your full chest, right? So you cannot be an anonymous leader on Sway. So you have to go through identity verification as well. And so we need to know that the people that we are following are real individuals who have stake in the decision in the community. Is that going to prevent all bad acting? No, but I think it is remarkably different than the way other social networks are out there. And also, I think it's important. We are not a content or information sharing platform at the heart, so we don't need rage, right? Like this is essentially a place where you go to make a handshake. And then later on, you're going to receive information that is important in voting, but we just don't have the same incentive structure as some of these other platforms.
I mean, first of all, I beg to differ. I feel like the bike lanes in our town were very, very ragey. I mean, it was surprising.
But that rage will happen off platform.
No, I know. Ali, maybe share growing up during the 1979 Iranian Revolution. When you were writing about Sway, you said, I know how much worse it can get. That you wanted to do something to inform civic engagement at this particular moment. You chose neutrality. Maybe talk about the choice for neutrality, and then talk about your thought on security and verification, because you also have a lot of experience with other social networks.
Yeah. So I will say, and I grew up in Iran, but I think a lot of people from other countries look to the United States as a beacon, as a, ideal. In my case, having read about the idea that all people are equal and it's a place where, self-determination. And even I was a little kid, I was, 8 or 9, but it's something I was motivated and inspired by. I've lived here for 40 years, and I think what I've learned is we can do better. The government here has some elements of self-determination, but there's definitely a lot to be desired. And having seen through different parts of my own involvement with advocacy and politics, it just doesn't feel like the system is in the United States or anywhere in the world is as far advanced as other parts of society are. During my lifetime, the way I shop has completely changed. The way I consume entertainment has completely changed. Like every other part of our lives has become in some way or another, more modern due to technology. And meanwhile, it feels in a lot of ways politics has not changed or improved much at all, perhaps gotten worse. So now technology has perhaps made politics worse, actually, because of things like social media. And I think the two real sources of that problem, one is that people can post without their identity being known. So people can create false IDs or bots. They're not even human beings, and inject messages into the stream. And two, that the algorithms intentionally amplify whatever will create sensation, which is often false things. So with Sway, every single individual will be verified as a human being, checking ID, and there will be absolutely no communication if you're anonymous. So if you're merely receiving information and not posting, you can stay anonymous, but absolutely no way to communicate through our platform while hiding behind anonymity. So that's number one. And then number two, we won't amplify anything. We're not even planning to have a feed, because we're not trying to have a addicted user base checking it every day. Mm-hmm. The UI model I would consider as an analog is you might have used Partovi, and you certainly have used Luma, because that's how you got the invite to this event. They're both kind of similar. Partovi is the one I prefer because it's just easier to use and very mobile centric. Think about how this works. There's a host who creates the event, like Lexi created this event, sends the invite to a whole bunch of people. You RSVP through your mobile phone, and then the host can send you other information, like the reminder today saying don't forget to come or whatever, and you come to the event. It's not a tool for spreading misinformation. It's just a transaction. What would Partovi for politics look like? The event is the election, and the person who's trying to get a user base will ask you to sign up for their following, and then as the election approaches, they'll send you reminders. Don't forget to vote, and here's who to vote for. Certainly, there could be ways it could be misused, but it's not inherently dependent on a feed or on amplification of some views or another.
Yeah. Okay. I am going to ask Claire one last question, then we're going to open it up to the audience. Then we have lightning round. Then you get to mix and mingle over pizza after we get a picture together. And if you don't want that picture blasted all over social media and potentially used against your wishes, don't be in it. No, I'm just kidding. We'll use it for all the typical ways. But some people don't like that. So Claire, you just started, you're the CEO, right? To clarify,
Yes.
Ali is your co-founder. You're the CEO.
Yes.
And you just got started. Similar, we're about a year in. What does success look like a year from now? Because I think you're trying to be specifically local as you start, right? So, and how can this audience help you, whether that is by becoming a user of the platform or in other ways?
I just know I'm going to squeal the first time I see Sway listed as a reason for a change in either the agenda of a local community or the outcome of an election, because then we will know success to me is impact in the real world. It's not the number of people who sign up, but it's that somebody utilizes this in a way that is that changes the game. And I will say we actually have somebody who is working on postpartum Medicare reform in, like, she wants more in Wisconsin. She shared once last week. She already has so many people behind her, and she's reaching out to the Speaker of the Wisconsin House, who is holding this bill that passed committee up in order to get him to try to bring it to the floor, with the idea that people are behind her. And I'm like, oh my God, if it works, and it was, just 1 week of sharing. So those sort of things, that is success. Obviously, people don't know this, but there are 164,000 seats up for election across the country in 2025, but 2026 is go time. Check us out in all of the major publications at that point, and being a real factor in these state house races. Basically anything where people do not have off the top of their head who the candidate is and why they support them, bridging that gap, making it easier, making voters feel more empowered that their issues that they care about are, accruing interest in the world through leaders that they trust going out and doing actions. Chef's kiss. That's what I want.
I think it'll really be, changing that speaker's policy would be nice, but the thing that'll really unlock things is if they don't do it and they lose their next election, because that will tell every candidate or every official that they need to pay attention to what the people want.
And do you, just to make it really specific, do you want everybody in this room to download Sway, to use Sway, to check it out, or where are you in the wanting users?
Apply for a job at Lanai.
Yes, thank you.
And on the wait list for...
Yeah.
Yeah, but...
we can talk partnership, buddy.
Yeah, there's currently a wait list. You can sign up for it. There are a number of users in beta access, and we're gradually opening the wait list.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Audience, let's hear from you. Thank you, Kate Connolly. And if you want to introduce yourself with explanation of what community issue you care about or what brought you here tonight, we'd love to hear that. And Andrea, how are we taking from the Zoom? Virtual audience, don't be shy. We see you.
We see you, virtual audience.
So I'm Kate Connolly. I am a recovering games marketer.
You've got to go like that. You got to really kiss
recovering games marketer. Wanted to say that kind of quietly at first.
Yeah.
And now I have a couple of different projects going on in civic tech. My question to you all is, I understand getting a referral to Sway socially through somebody I know and trust. But let's say I just heard of this thing called Sway, and I really want to know how to vote on the Joel and Gardio recall coming up. And I go in and I get this list of, how do I choose? If I don't have any personal connection to any of the people who are posting about an issue, how do I go in and pick which one I want to connect with?
I'm going to be candid that's not the use case that we're designing for it at the beginning. Frankly, because there's already a lot of information like that out there. People use Google for that type of inquiry, and there's competing voices on Google. Google's not perfect. Our general feeling is that consumer websites don't just spread by themselves to tens of millions of people. Someone spreads it. So if you go back, if anyone is old enough to remember MySpace, it spread because bands would tell their fans from on stage, friend us on MySpace. Change.org spread to hundreds of millions of people because somebody creates a petition and then sends it to everyone and says, please sign it. So for us, the mechanism for spreading ties to these hosts.
Right.
At some point, once we have enough content, meaning enough people on different issues, if there are, like 10 people advocating for recall Joel and Gardio and 6 people advocating for don't recall, then we might have a search interface where you can type what you're thinking about and see the different people on one side or the other of the issue, but that's not in our kind of V1
you're really it's viral trusted sources.
Exactly.
At first.
And I'm so glad you used the word trust, which we should have brought up earlier. I think trust is a big part of what's missing in politics, because if there's someone it could be your neighbor, it could be your college friend saying this is what you should vote, and you trust them, that counts more than getting some information on Google or on some website. Right. And so our website as well, it's going to be based on helping you get connected to someone you trust, i.e. someone you already knew who probably sent you a group text or something saying, vote with me on this topic.
Okay, great.
All right, Amanda, and then Abby. Oh, it's Abby, then Amanda. All right. Elliot, way to screw it up, man.
I heard too much. This is part of the problem of my question, I guess, is I would say I would list like 10 issues I care about. And so I'm walking in the dog patch and I see your sign. I'm like, sweet, I want a crosswalk here too. But that's probably not the main issue I would make my decision on. I'm like, do we care? Are you building affordable housing? So how do you think about the nuance of the multitude of issues someone would care about? I think the interesting one is like, if I'm like an NRA member, that I might vote 100% on that, or I might have 100% on choice, say. But I'm curious of the smaller local issues. How you think about that?
Yeah. Maybe saying it again, it's like,
She definitely got my question.
No, because everybody's like,
Everybody, someone has asked this before. Because
nobody is a single issue voter on the crosswalk on Mariposa.
Yeah.
Although it is really, it's if you've ever gotten off on 280.
Modern Family episode where she was trying to get a stop sign.
I worked there. I know that crosswalk. It was a big deal.
It's really bad. Okay. Yeah. No one is a single issue voter. And also, I think it's an interesting example because the trust here, when they scan my QR code, I say dog patch resident and neighborhood runner, right? Like they don't know me. So I assume that this is going to be part of ideally a broader Sway ballot guide that they are going to receive. One thing that's really interesting for us to think about, and I think right now we anticipate, if you have multiple recommendations on multiple, like say you follow somebody on housing, you follow somebody on homelessness, and you follow somebody on like abundance, right? And you have this grouping. Not every recommendation might align. We're going to serve all of those to you, and you are going to get to make a choice. Now, this is actually interesting for what's known as the Sway score. Right now, the Sway score is just the number of registered voters who could vote on my crosswalk. But over time, looking at who's voting in primaries, who's voting in generals, what recommendations they're receiving, we would like that value to be modeled such that it would be the expected number of votes that come with any given recommendation. But I am under no illusion that random Claire telling you not to vote for somebody is going to like change things. But when you start to get a bucket of stuff that's interesting, then yeah, like we can model that if 4 out of the 5 people, or something where you are an amplifying leader for something, an amplifying leader is a supporter who chooses to like go and also get supporters for this such that they all level up. And so now we have a coalition and a movement. That will mean that it's probably more likely that you're voting for that one person. I will also point out that I have a Sway page on education as well, because I taught for 10 years, and that page has people who know me, and it will be like a different set. And we have some product thoughts about whether or not all of that gets served on one page, because the crosswalk is very local. Yeah, but
it's super early, right?
We started in February. We have people who are on the product and using it, but yeah.
It's Abby, right?
Abby, yeah.
Abby, your question is, I'd say one way to think about it, if you were an NRA member, you would receive the NRA voter guide with what to vote for your entire ballot.
Yeah.
That's not taking advantage of any sort of digital technology or smartphone, or it might as well be a paper in an envelope. Imagine if instead you received a voter guide that said, for hashtag street safety, Claire recommends this city supervisor. For hashtag affordable housing, Mary recommends this city supervisor. If they are the same, bingo, you just vote for that person. If they happen to be different, then you can decide which is more important to you. And imagine having that all the way down the ballot.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people won't be as engaged as you are. They might only follow Claire or only follow Mary or so on, and then they don't have to resolve any conflict.
Yep.
But hopefully over time, people will, find many different people to follow for many causes and just know what to vote for as mediated by leaders that they trust on causes that they care about.
It strikes me as you're talking, you're trying to disrupt single influence voter, single influencers that their influence outweighs their expertise, like NRA going all the way down the ballot. And then you're also disrupting single issue voting, of which none of us are really single issue voting.
Correct.
We're all
And by the way,
multitudes.
I think it's a bit of a fiction, the single issue voter. It's just the technology historically
Right. That's what
is one voter guide.
That I didn't totally get that until you answered Abby's question, where it's like you're giving me a way to say, yes, I believe in this person on many things, but on my local issues, especially where you guys are starting, that definitely doesn't apply. Amanda had another question here.
Hi, I'm Amanda, and I sit on 2 philanthropic boards, and then I'm also an elected member of our school district board of trustees. And when I came today, I thought that maybe the definition of influence was going to be a little different, because so much of what is happening is that elected leaders are taking their presence in their whatever jurisdiction they're in as a mandate on something, rather than knowing what their voters want in the interim between voting cycles, between voting sessions. So I thought maybe that Sway would also have an element of almost like crowdsourcing. How do my constituents feel on things, where it sounds more like it's being built for the voting, like vote with me on this issue. But a couple of your examples were actually mid-cycle, like the woman in Wisconsin or the crosswalk. Like that's being done on how our representatives themselves vote, not how we vote.
That's a great point.
I love this, and thank you for asking, because I would be sad if people walked out with this wrong impression. We do, there's a metaphor for Sway where it's a new form of political currency backed by civic action, and that civic action is voting. But we do intend to unleash leaders all year round. And one of the product ways that we're thinking about doing that is being able to send to your elected representatives from Sway an email that's essentially in a wrapper that shows how much influence you have, like what your Sway score is. Because, and you would know this way better than either of us, but if someone is a constituent who's sending you something, you just get their email address. And so you have to parse, like, does this person have influence? How many people come with them? Like, how big of an issue this is? So we are thinking about ways to engage electeds and then candidates as well. If you're at a certain point in the cycle and you're sending you something about no cell phones in elementary school, and then Sway is like, hey, that's cool that you send it to Amanda, but do you also want to send it to Amanda's, the declared candidates against Amanda? Like, yes, we will help send that out so that person has the greatest maximum leverage to get that issue taken care of. I think the last thought I have on this is that so this was back to the first question about discovery. While we are unlikely to have discovery for supporters anytime soon on the roadmap, we are very likely to have discovery for leaders who are working on the same thing, and help them build those coalitions in order to strengthen movements in the interim. But yeah, I think for the average voter, one of the core value props is making voting easier. But I also, if we can get this into the zeitgeist, it is a way to sort of like passively give your care to someone and allow it to accrue interest, like as they're out doing work on all of our behalf.
I would say it's absolutely for influence mid-cycle in between elections, but it's backed by essentially the threat that this person, if you don't do what they're asking for, all of their followers will vote for a candidate who promises they will. So the threat of voting for you or against you at the next election is what makes the influence in between elections more powerful.
It's a cool idea, though. I do think that it's almost a different idea and I've had candidates say that, like, you lose the ability to pulse check or crowdsource. How do people really feel? There isn't a good way to do that. It's like a focus group writ large that
polling is utterly broken. And even if it were accurate, you don't know whether someone will vote based on it.
Yeah.
Because you don't know whether they'll remember it at the time of the election. Will they even vote at all?
Yeah.
So there's so much, just increasing turnout, just sending people digital reminders saying, hey, there's a primary election.
Right.
The vast majority of people don't vote in
don't know that. We spend
So-
more time on what we eat than what we'll vote on.
So, just for clarification, while you're in beta, is your current vision to focus on local, but then evolve to state and national?
Yes, I think Sway is most powerful at local because small vote margins matter in local races. And we anticipate that the numbers will be modest at the beginning, and that's where it will make most sense. But I also think Sway's greatest value props will be in primaries, where there's low information and a lot of choice, places where there's ranked choice voting because the ballot is complicated, and also places like San Francisco, like many major urban cities where everyone is one party. And so now we need to parse through the nuance of, like, what does this person care about versus another? So,
All right. And
double question that's a little bit against the rules, but go for
Can
it.
I say something as a clarifying thing?
Yes, but
So the
then
answer-
single.
We're not going to prevent somebody from using Sway for a national purpose. And some of the best fit, some of the go-to-market work we're doing is national groups that have local change efforts. So, like, there's a national effort to limit smartphones and social media in schools. That's a local cause, but there's like a national leader. And one of the things we didn't get into is that Sway enables a hierarchy where I can vote with Claire, but Claire can vote with Mary, and Mary can, vote with Beth, and so on. And so somebody at a national level could send voter guides to a much larger base.
Thank you for explaining what Sway is. My question is, you're verifying the ID of everyone who joins the platform, right? So as a user who has never heard of Sway, how do you have to what do you do to gain the trust for them to give you their ID, and what are your policies in terms of retaining that data?
And will you just say your name and
Anirban,
what do you do?
I'm a machine learning engineer at Palo Alto.
Hello, welcome.
soon to be Lanai.
Let's answer his question first.
Okay.
Shall we?
So right now we are not doing like a full KYC flow, but we do not store any personal data. We tell people straight up. So no stored PII. We hit the voter registration API. We store like a binary of whether or not you're registered. We hash your GeoID. That's it. Right now, I am personally shocked at the number of people who willingly give us that data. So I will just throw that out there.
So can I jump in? I think the starting one is Raymond's question of who's the initial customer, because it's a good question. We're consciously not viewing either the voter as initial customer profile nor the candidate. It's that person who is passionate about a cause, who's putting up a QR code for the crosswalk, or the person who is trying to push the Medicare for, in Wisconsin. That person, already there are hundreds of thousands of those people in the United States who lack a tool to be able to organize their existing followers to give them influence. So there's a real existing need. And simply by putting up a QR code on a street corner for how many weeks? 2 weeks?
Yeah, less than that.
Yeah. Claire already has 60 followers who've done ID and so on. So that the person who's the organizer, we're giving them a real value, but then they use our tool to get the apathetic voters on. Those people who've clicked her QR code, those are ordinary voters who care about the crosswalk.
And Ali, sorry, can you talk in that respect about Pam's accessibility?
This matters immensely to me. My background is in classroom teaching, and so there's a lot of design choices that we are making. We are hitting every accessibility standard. I also think a lot about age and just comfort with tech, and thinking about making sure that it's the easiest thing to use possible. I think there is an assumption here that people do have access to smartphones or online, that we can't solve some of the larger problems about access there. But I think 95% of Gen Z, who right now are kind of an apathetic block comparatively, they have cell phones. They have access to the internet. Ideally, we would work, overall to get more people onto it. But my thought is right now they are apathetic voters because they haven't been able to connect their vote to a cause that matters. But if there's a TikTok video or there's something that's like, hey, we really care about climate or whatever, like that one engagement could be the thing that brings them in. And my hope for Sway is that we become the number one referrer of voter registrations, and we drive turnout in a way that wasn't previously there. I do want to address influence really quickly. So influence, I have talked to so many local campaign managers, and I always ask a question that's like, okay, so you have your candidate and then you have your constituents. What would need to be true about an interstitial layer? Like, how many votes would that person have to come with for you to be interested in talking to them? And it is eerie how many people, like, they've all coalesced on one number. Does anybody want to guess what that number is? 10. So
say it again.
So, but basically, for local races, for board of supervisor, for state reps, I ask, like, how many people would a person have to come with for you to be interested in talking to them? And they're like, 10, like 10 people. Like,
is this
10? Like the one on my hands, like that one? Yeah. Anyway, so I'm just saying that voters are incredibly valuable. Now, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to pick up your thing on the agenda, but like it is an incredibly, well, I want to ask elected representatives, but if you knew who in your community had a block behind them, it would be worth having conversations with those individuals. And right now, it might be pastors, it might be community leaders, but like there could be somebody who's incredibly influential who's worth having the conversation. There was something else about influence.
I think we have a cluster of questions that I can hear what you said, but the words didn't sync. And you know what?
I think
you may remember, but otherwise I have a bridge to the end here.
Well, Jennifer asked a question about the influence of money. And
okay.
I would say money in politics is spent ultimately on getting votes. It's spent on running ads to influence who you vote for, and it's spent on door knocking, get out the vote operations, both of which are more efficiently accomplished via a smartphone that sends you an alert that says the person you trust on the issue you care about says it's time to vote, and here's who to vote for. So this is not going to eliminate money in politics, but it'll disrupt it, because we are now building a people-powered network that accomplishes all the same things without money based on the issues people care about. So to answer Leo's question, I think what you were saying is if we could just fantasize about what does everything look like in the future someday, like close your eyes, what would democracy look like on a system like this? There's a concept called liquid democracy, which is, it's an academic concept, but essentially it's a graph, a tree of different people delegating their vote to somebody else on given topics, and kind of connecting and going upwards in a hierarchy, so that you can imagine, a really diverse lattice or mosaic of people interconnected on different topics. So maybe there's one whole graph of people who care about, the street safety, a different unrelated graph for affordable housing, a different one for foreign policy or nuclear energy. I should add that nothing we've talked about here is limited to the United States of America. There are people who care about street safety, believe it or not, in Mexico City or in Shanghai or in Cape Town, and anywhere where people feel like their voice isn't being heard could use a mechanism like this. So in the very long run, our hope is that this is a global network, and then there's really new potential, because if you think local government doesn't work, or you think national government doesn't work, what really doesn't work is global government. The United Nations is a performative theater that doesn't have any teeth. No one elected our representatives there. I doubt anyone here can even name our representative in the, well, actually people here maybe could name, but I couldn't name our representative in the United Nations.
Not Elise Stefanik.
And because no one voted for them, they don't have any real power. And therefore, as a species, we're unable to solve solvable problems. If an alien from outer space, or even if other species were looking at us saying, look at these humans, they're causing the entire planet's climate to change, and they can't figure out how to stop that. They're killing each other in wars. It's ridiculous that as such an advanced species, we're making these choices because we can't govern our planet. And so my hope is that with the entire species of humans connected through this network, we'll have more, let's just say, more cooperative ways to solve these problems instead of going to war with each other.
Can we get a big round of applause for these guys? I have a couple closing remarks, but who here feels like the world is going just fine? America's in a good place, just business as usual. It's going to be just okay. Raise your hand if you're in that boat. Okay. So here's a couple things that I'd like you to sort of sit with, which is everybody here had time to come tonight. So you have time. You probably have some money because you all have nice shoes. I'm just kidding. I did check out your shoes, though. You especially. Nice shoes. And you have talent. My experience of running for office was like most people in Silicon Valley could not compute. It was like, how could you walk and chew gum? It's okay for Elon to have 7 businesses and 17 children. It just didn't make sense that I came out of tech to run for politics, especially the U.S. Senate, without prior experience. It didn't compute. But they're so much more similar. Politics is an ecosystem of startup people, great ideas, but there is no ecosystem of funding those ideas. And because there's no ecosystem of funding those ideas, we don't get the best people and we don't get the best talent. And why? That's because the ROI is different. The ROI is not growth at all costs. The ROI is we leave this planet better for the generations from whom we are borrowing. And so what I want to applaud both of you guys most for is there is a big weird thing happening in the Valley right now where you have some men who played poker together who went out and influenced a lot and are still influencing a lot. And I don't mean disrespect, but they use the concept of like, we are friends, we care about things, we have influenced an outcome at a very big level that we are all living with. And you are taking the insight that people influence people and that people organized can do big things. And so like it, love it, hate it, have feedback for it, want to fund it, want to try it. Just God bless for trying. Please give them feedback on what would make it better. You know, don't do the things that humans do when they hear dreamers talking where they say, oh, it was great to their face, and then they don't actually do anything about it. If you love it, tell them. If you hate it, tell them. If you have ideas, tell them. If not now, later. Please.
Thank you, Lexi.
Because the theory of change that I have is small communities like this one that light each other up and start talking, change the world. And Lord knows there is a lot to change, starting with AI analytics and working at Lanai. #CCAT. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, virtual team. Thank you guys both so much.